table to at least discuss it, and then when we're done with discussing, we'll put it back on the table until the May meeting.
Actually, you don't, because you left the deliberations, so you'll just pick up deliberations where you left off.
Okay, don't need to worry about that. What we're gonna, I guess, try to do is go through these proposed language and current language, discuss a little, I guess, share our opinions with each other, and come up with, I guess, our own mindset and how far we get through tonight, whether the sun comes up before we're done or not. But we're not going to actually do a motion until the month of May meeting. So if we get through all of them tonight and we all kind of have formed our opinions, then we'll be ready Wednesday, in May to take the motion. But and if I ever find the right paper. Do y'all have from last month?
He's going to start on page 1.
Page 1, E1A. No turbine shall be closer than 500 feet or a total height of the turbine plus 50, whichever is greater. Just because I'm the chairman doesn't mean I need to do all the talking, but I don't want to prolong this any longer than it needs to be. Anybody has anything to say before we move to the second one?
Well, I agree with the proposed language, and I even think it should be further than 1.5 times, in my opinion, and some of the stuff that I've read, so.
How are we
That's
with,
what I say.
does the state have a regulation on this, a total regulation? I mean, what's theirs?
No,
They don't have. They don't have.
Left up to every county, that's why there's such an issue.
You know, we had an expert come in years ago to help form these regulations. You know, we have approved those regulations. So, I mean, I think that's something we definitely need to consider.
I wasn't here for that, so I don't know what was said, but how long ago was that, you know? Like when it was originally.
When they're ready
The
to
problem is, they're coming in now at 600 feet turbines, and I think back then they were 250. So that's where my issue is that they're bigger and taller and.
Are there any 250s anywhere close? Well, I don't know if that was that ever a...
That was what the original, wasn't that what the original CWEPs were?
I have no idea. I just know what I drive through in Spearville. What them 250s.
There are
350s.
probably, Raymond, not around here, they're all coming in with the 650 as far as I know.
And that 1.5 times doesn't cover what you want it to cover, even though they're 600 versus...
That is the proposed language.
Right,
Right now, it's 500 feet,
right.
and the proposed language is
Is
to change it to
1.5.
1.5 times. I'd like to see it further away, but I'd live with 1.5. So, I just don't want it encroached on my property, I guess.
Well, the regulations are 500 foot or the height of the unit plus 50 foot.
Which would be
So
700 feet.
if the unit falls over, it's not going to be on your property or anybody's property.
If it falls over, but
When we get to
there's other issues. In my opinion, Richard, there's other issues not falling over. I don't see that ever happening unless there's a tornado.
What other issues are you talking about?
Well, if there were a turbine built 700 feet from my property line on the west side of my property, I'm gonna get the shadow flicker from that. That's what my big issues are. So, I'm not, well, let me just say, I am not against the wind turbines coming in. I'm against them coming into an agricultural setting where there's too many people living around close.
When you say agricultural setting, are you talking about actual agriculture, or are you talking about a bunch
Well, I
of
can't.
5-acre lots with houses on them?
Yeah, I mean, I live in an agricultural setting. I don't want them in my area. What a farmer does with 500 acres, I can't. I mean, that's not for me to say, but I think as a zoning board, we need to be, aware of people that live out in the country and that have small acreage and why they're living out there, so. And I know there's a big monetary value for the farmers, and that's great. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to get into a big argument about it. I'm not against them. I'm against them in my backyard. I'll just say that.
Just a minute. For the record, this is our discussion, so no public input will be allowed tonight unless we have a question for you, being this here.
I just
Thank you.
wanted to clarify a point about, not about arguing the issue, but what that statement says. I think maybe it was misinterpreted there. If you might
Like,
reread
what did
it.
you have?
Have, when we consider distance, the thing with the flicker, the people that are setting it up, or where, I don't know if they've actually designated exactly how many feet on their picture that it's gonna be, but I'm assuming that when we're looking at that you could have a minimum amount of distance if that is to the north of you, but if it's to the south of the turbines to the south of you, then if the concerns with the flicker, then it ought to be written in there, instead of being a consistent distance, the effect of it is not going to be a constant distance. And, I mean, you understand?
Because of the sun.
Yeah, yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I guess I'm not sure that we as a planning board need to make so much restrictions.
Get in on it.
No, but maybe when it goes to the county commissioners, if that at least isn't written down someplace, they might look at that and maybe nobody says anything, and then you find out later, well, yeah, it's affecting this one over here, but it's not affecting this, just so that there's, you know, the knowledge of that they would consider that, because then people like you, that could make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the sad part of it is, if I own this piece of property sitting here, whether it's 5 acres or if it's 160, and we put whatever stipulation that the tower can only be so many feet from my property or my house, at some point when the sun sets, you're going to get flicker.
Mm-hmm.
That shadow is going to go a long way at sunset, but it isn't going to last very long.
Yeah.
And so
You'd have a lot to write in there if you.
Yeah.
You'd even have to maybe get a photometer out there, and because the flicker could get so dim that you wouldn't almost notice it.
And whatever distance, like you said, whatever distance it is, there will be
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah. Any further items on this part?
Well, getting back to the distance, talk about things, ice throwing. I did some calculations, and there's no way that you're going to throw ice these type of feet that it says. take a diameter of that turbine, how many RPM it's going. The blade speed is not gonna be a whole lot over 100 mile an hour. You just take a home run hitter hitting a ball, it gets just a little over 100 mile an hour. And we know how far that goes. 500 foot at the most. So when you bring that stuff up, I start to question a lot of this other stuff that's brought up.
Yeah.
I think we have good regulations as far as setback.
Sure. Anybody else? Before we move to number 2?
I guess I do have a question. So as we go through these, we're just discuss them, and then in May, do we vote on these as a whole, or can we vote on these as individual items?
John, would you like to step in about now? And answer that?
Sure, I think that's at the discretion of the board how they want to handle it. Either way is perfectly acceptable if you want to vote on each proposed edit, or vote on them as a whole.
And if I'm understanding correctly, when we come time to vote on these, if we come up with one of these proposed language that we all like and we all vote for it, that then becomes the new language in that reg, right?
No, it still has to go to the Board of County Commissioners, but your recommendation would be approval of new language to the regulations.
So I'm going to step out on a limb and say that each one of these is going to take its own motion, because if they all go to the county commissioners individually on a split vote with our board, the county commissioner will need to see that and I guess address that.
From an archiving standpoint, it'd be a lot more efficient if you did it that way.
I just can't personally see how we're all going to be able to come to an agreement
Well, I don't think so.
and vote on every one of these in a whole. I know I wouldn't be.
I agree. Well, and each
So-
one has a different issue.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I would tend to think we're going to vote individually and motion each one of them. You good, Kathy?
I agree. I like that one. Thank you.
E1B, no turbines shall be located in such a way that it casts a shadow on a non-participating property not in the special use. And no turbine shall be located closer than a mile from property lines not included in the special use. There we go again. I don't know how you can stop it from not casting on a non-participating property.
Well, then we can start regulating trees then too. I mean, you have trees right on the property line, they're gonna cast a shadow.
That's not an industrial mission.
Yeah, but it's casting a shadow, and it'll cast a bigger shadow than the wind turbine. Well, I mean, we're just getting into I'm not saying right or wrong, but we're getting into that, what do you regulate, what do you not, where are you gonna draw a line?
You're getting into where one person's property affects another person's property.
That's correct.
And where
That is correct.
does one person's rights trump the other person's rights?
Should have. It should have, in my opinion, but it's a touchy, tough subject. I know there are a lot of people that stand to gain financially if these wind turbines come in, and I'm happy for that. I just think that as a zoning board, we need to consider everybody in the county, and everybody in the county is not a farmer. Everybody doesn't stand to gain financially.
The bad thing about that whole deal, the farming deal, is you turn around and McPherson County has kind of forgotten the agriculture to a certain extent, in my opinion. And they've turned around and yeah, we've got industry and it's fantastic and everybody's happy about it and all that, but that industry comes and goes. And farming is still there, although we've opened it up to allow people to build out in the country, and that's fine too. But it gets to a point where every time we have a downfall or something like that, and the income goes down, we lose a farmer, we lose a voice. And so we basically are at anybody's, you know, you can turn around and anybody can have a voice if they have 5 acres, and that's fine, but is it still the best interest of agriculture? And this would still be farmer owned to a certain extent. It's not like the oil industry from years and years ago where they came in, they leased everything up and you had no control. I think we've learned from that to a certain extent, because I think the leases are a lot better than the oil industry. And you know this, in that property that I bought that was your family's has 2 oil wells on the far end. It has eroded out the you know what, and big chunks of concrete out there yet, and nobody's ever going to take care of those except for me, because I own the property now. But this is all set in a lease where I think we've learned something from that, and I don't think it's all a negative thing. I think we've learned a lot from that, so I don't know.
Well, I think we need to err on the side of caution with these.
Are they any different than
Well, in
oil
my
industry?
personal opinion, in 20 years, these are gonna be obsolete. That's my personal opinion, from the research that I've
And
done.
if you talk to some of the oil pumpers, McPherson's on the downside of oil production,
Sure.
big time. And so what's gonna happen there in 20 years?
They're not 600 feet tall.
But they're not underground either, and they haven't ruined our water supply too.
Okay,
Yeah.
we could.
And then the other thing too is, if the wind towers are obsolete in 20 years, they've got money put away to read.
They say they will.
It's
Well,
in
they
the
will,
lease, yeah.
because we've sat here and listened to them, and that's part of the county's job to do that.
Just to make sure that they do.
Yeah, that money will be set aside for destruction.
Mhm.
But,
Okay. That's, I mean, that's, I don't wanna be argumentative.
well, and
I just don't want it in my backyard. I'll just, and a lot of other people in the county don't either, so I just.
Convince your neighbors not to put one up.
Could just pay them.
Yeah, just pay them what they're
Pay them what
gonna
they're gonna
Yeah,
get from their
sure.
towers, and
Sure.
then they'll take care of it.
Can you define what your backyard is?
I just think we need to be conscious of everybody in the county.
That's a good question. How far is your
Yeah, what's
backyard?
your-
I mean, how
50
big?
acres.
I mean, no. If you don't want one in your backyard or around, then how far out would you be thinking that? It'd have to
Well,
be.
I mean, that's what some of these, the
setback
new
is.
language is a setback. I mean, there's gonna be shadow flicker, they're gonna be in my backyard, that how close to my backyard should they be, or to anyone's backyard should they be, so.
Well, if you get that setback double, then that pushes a guy out of getting a tower. Now you've created a financial hardship for him.
I don't know.
And you know, you talk about wind farms being obsolete. Look at battery technology. When they find that all the battery they can store wind energy, it will be cheap energy at that point, and very reliable. I mean, it may not be probably gonna be in my lifetime, but just look how far battery technology is going. There's somebody.
anything else on E1B? E1C, no turbine shall be closer than 6,600 feet from a residential structure. Currently, we're at 2,000 feet.
Is the 2,000?
Same thing I already said.
Is the
I
2,000 feet
do.
close to what the other counties have? Does anybody know?
Every county has different regulations.
But we don't know what they are, the ones neighboring us.
Well, Reno County hasn't approved anything yet.
What about Marion County?
Marion County, I don't know. I know Marion, I do know for a fact Marion County's having some real issues with the turbines coming in and everything not being the way that they thought it was gonna be.
Like what? You have an idea of what you're talking about?
Specifically, no. I know that some of the people that sign leases feel like the company didn't follow through with what they said they were gonna do, but specifically, I don't know. So, no, I just didn't give you another point on it, but went out of my brain. There's a lot of counties fighting these right now, and down in southern Kansas, a lot of issues. Every county has to come up with their own zoning regulations, and so it's been a real hot button for all of them, just like it is here. And the state did try, there was some legislature that just went through a bill that was proposed to the state to make all regulations the same, and it failed.
Failed committee, yeah.
So, it's back to each individual county coming up with their own regulations, which some are gonna be really loose and some of them are gonna be really tight. It just depends.
I got the impression that we were already, and I don't know where I got this impression from, but we were already somewhat farther away than some of the other counties as far as distances. Anybody know that?
That I don't know, and I haven't called to ask, and I don't know if John can enlighten us any.
No, if you remember 2 years ago, my research turned up the same thing. It's all over the place, so it's impossible to get any kind of confirmation of what somebody's distance is. So.
Anything else on E1C? Move to E1G, which is a new reg that we don't have any current language on. But now that I say that, it's talking about noise source, but somewhere we had a 65 decibel reg. Remember that?
Well, there is, you're right, there is. I think this proposed new language is just stating
Yeah.
how it would be measured.
F4J1. Ours is 65, it's on the next page. But,
What page is that on?
page 5 is where it's F4J1 is our current language is 65 decibels.
Okay. So E1G, I think, is just talking about how it should be measured. I don't know that we have any language on that.
Well, I don't understand. If you have a decibel meter and you're standing under the tower, if it's over 65 decibels, it's out of compliance. If it's under 65, you're good. To me, the further you get away from the tower, the less it's going to be. I was underneath the tower at Spearville last July, and the air conditioning unit cooling the system at the bottom of the tower was noisier than the blades were at 12 mile an hour wind. But, I think the 65 that we got is adequate for my sake. You guys got anything else on that E1G? On E1H, did the wildlife people say this, John? They didn't want them within 3 miles? Is that what I understand this?
No, this is the applicant's paperwork. So that's from the applicant.
That there was a
Well, I don't know
recommendation.
why wildlife and parks should have a voice, What should be next to them?
Well, not when they got oil wells in the middle of it,
Yeah.
No?
but, I don't.
I wouldn't vote for that for nothing.
Well, Richard, I think the point of that one is because the blades and the wildlife that the blades affect. The oil wells aren't necessarily, birds aren't flying into that.
But there's still effect. I mean, there's dead spots over there from groundwater contamination and everything else from those oil wells, so there's still an effect, and those animals have adapted to that, just like they would adapt to the wind
If
turbines.
Wildlife and Parks starts to have control of any property within 3 miles of their land that they have, I wouldn't be able to do anything on any of the land that I own. And so there's no way I'm gonna vote for anything with Wildlife and Parks involved. That's just one of these things that make this whole thing that you put together really hard for me to swallow.
Wildlife and parks, don't they have to, John, don't they have to provide some kind of recommendation or report for the county?
No, they'll respond to a special use application by a project provider. They don't comment
They
in
don't
general.
make a judgment on it? they
No, it's a
just-
case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Moving to, I think E11. Yeah. Locate turbines so no shadow is cast on a non-participating property. I don't know that that's much different than this one is showing a shadow, is it?
Part is more specific.
E18. Total turbine height shall be limited to 250.
Which one on?
E18, the bottom one.
There's just an awful lot of words there when you just need to put in one sentence. No commercial wind energy farms in the county. All this other stuff, that's what it is. Now, we have areas in the county that are very sparsely populated that could very well be used for wind energy. And we're making regulations for the whole county. And these regulations would be denying people the ability to lease their ground for wind energy that would be in a remote location in the county. And I just don't see how we can make our regulations to basically prohibit wind energy, commercial wind energy farms in the entire county.
I don't think that's what anybody wants to do, but I do.
Oh, come on.
I do
I'm
think
not
that
that
they should
naive.
be allowed in the remote areas, Richard. I
But
mean,
if we turn around and,
Yeah,
if we
but
turn around
that,
past these.
no higher than 250 foot, that
Well,
is
we're
not
just
gonna be
going-
allowed in,
Well,
it's
we
not
have-
commercially feasible to put a wind energy farm limited at 250 foot and make it
feasible.
viable.
Well, but I think what we're doing is going through each one case by case. I
Yeah, I
mean,
know we're going through each one case by case.
250 feet may not be feasible, but 1.5 times the height from a participating property line might be. I mean, we don't need to get up in arms because of one thing or two things. There's other things in here that are viable that could be included in the regulation.
But that one thing makes the entire wind energy farm, or wind energy project in the county uneconomical.
Correct.
Okay, well then.
I mean, I'll agree with you on that, but that doesn't mean that we will vote to say yay or nay on that. But we could say yay or nay on some of the other things.
The way that the properties are cut up in McPherson County, wouldn't you agree with me that it's gonna turn around and it's gonna affect us more than it would other people because you're that much closer to property lines? So you're gonna turn around and you're gonna eliminate a lot of property with that greater setback. A lot of landowners that are
Well,
wanting it.
I don't know that it would eliminate it, but it would certainly make their
It'd be-
footprint smaller.
It'd be tough to put one on a quarter of ground, wouldn't it? If you own a quarter, it'd be tough to put one on a quarter if you don't own the properties around it. Right?
Unless there's no homes around there, Raymond. if
Well,
there's
you're
no-
talking distance from property lines.
Yeah, it definitely would make it tougher for them.
Yeah, and if you own a quarter, you think, well, I've got something, you know? I've always felt that way. If I own a quarter of ground, I had something, and if it's bordered by 4 other people that own property, then
Right.
you're pretty well out of luck.
But those people, well, I don't know. I could argue. I'm not gonna argue. I'm
Well,
not
I don't
gonna
want-
change anybody's mind.
I don't want to cut no one short, but I also want to keep it moving too, as far as that goes and stay on point. But F4J1, 65 decibels,
There's lots of new studies out. You all need to be doing some research. There are lots of new studies out. And actually, Wisconsin, a county in Wisconsin just declared wind turbines a health hazard.
And there's a lot of noise by other things too.
I know.
Are we supposed to believe everything that we read?
But you're supposed to do your own research too.
I like to stay on point here, and I hesitated to bring this point up, but I thought a lot of times in research, if I'm doing the research and I don't pay the person enough to print the research because it's proven right, I don't get it printed. And sometimes I have to take a little grain of salt when I look at research because we've been in them situations.
I agree. I mean,
And
I
I don't-
can find research pro and I can find research con.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
And there's no.
but there's truth in all of it,
Yeah.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
so. I'm not saying they shouldn't be, that they don't serve a purpose. I just don't think they serve a purpose where there is a higher density of population in McPherson County.
And the frequency falls into this, what they're saying, because obviously, the low frequency, I guess, is the ones that affect people more, because 40 decibels is kind of like a whisper. And, I'm not saying I'm 100% mentally stable, but after 40 years of teaching, if 40 decibels was affecting me, I would have been gone long ago.
F4L1, I think, is next. Interference, GPS, microwave, television, navigational. I look at all of them that are in western Kansas, and I have yet to find anybody complaining about TV signal and stuff out there, but I don't live there, my daughter does, but
Does it need to be addressed though, in case there is?
well, I think the county's dealing with it with the 911 stuff
towers.
somehow, I think, prior to this, but to me, I guess I find it really hard that if it's caused a problem, we would have heard about it in western Kansas, Spearville, Dodge City, Cimarron, where all of them are located, long before now.
I haven't driven in close proximity, I mean, just down the interstate. Are there a lot of homes around where they build, like where your daughter lives, or is she close to one?
Well, when you drive into Spearville, it looks like the windmill's on top of the church steeple. They are close. And houses along Highway 50, if you ever went to Dodge City. if it was a problem, I would have thought by now there'd been farmers griping about GPS losing signal and TV, but maybe the TV's through satellite, so it's, how many people get 3 stations over the air anymore anyway, I don't know. You know, that way, but, any further discussion? I think we're to the last one. Well, I guess we're not either. The last one is the real property value protection plan. That looks extremely difficult to enforce.
The one thing that related to this that I know is, I think there's been 2 court cases, I can't tell where the first one was, and about a month ago I read about in Iowa, which has, I think they're second in the nation for the number of wind turbines up there. They got a tremendous amount of them. But they would have some, and I'd never ever heard of the community before, but again, they must be close to a city, so that a lot of people drive from there. They already had 3 of them put up, and there was a subdivision was already platted, but nothing there. They were a quarter mile away, and the court said that decision was that these will be removed. This is only the second time I think the court has said and ruled on that. And this cost them, like, it just blew my mind how much it takes. It was well over $100,000, I think, for each one of them to take them down. So this could possibly.
Was that due to property values or setback?
It was, I think it was, it had to do partly with the property values and maybe consideration of health issues. It would have, the towers would have been, I think, less than a quarter mile from where all those houses would have been built. And so the courts in the end can, I mean, whatever our commissioners say could then come in later in a lawsuit and eliminate some of them.
Anyone else?
I don't want to open up a hornet's nest. We'll get ready, because I guess I am. If a board member stands to gain financially from having these put on their property, should they be recused from
If they
voting,
own,
not having an opinion, but from voting?
if they own property, when a wind farm comes to have us vote on a conditional use, if they own property within that area, yes, they have to be off the board.
Okay.
But
But they can vote
this
on the,
is county regs,
okay.
so if they can't vote here, none of us can vote.
Even you, Captain. Because you own property.
I own property that I don't stand to gain
You'll be within a half a mile, right?
my bed.
Well, if you
No,
don't
I
lease to
know.
them, if you only
I
own
don't
50
lease.
acres, a half a mile outside the property of it is gonna get circumferenced.
But I wouldn't financially gain from it.
But you won't vote on a CWEP if you got within a half a mile.
Okay.
Make sense?
Say that to me again, on
Earlier,
what you said, what your first sentence was. When they come for a special use permit. Because right now, we haven't approved of a special use permit, right? Or have we?
on this one, no.
Here's your ground.
Wherever that map you got.
And they lease all this over here, you will be in that half mile notification circle.
Sure.
And you will not be able to vote on this, if this is a specific wind project.
So what's the point
Of what?
of the board, because none of us would be able to.
We don't
You
know.
will be able to, because you'll live in town, but.
Those guys will, they're onto that specific project.
But we're voting, like you said, we're voting county regs now.
Yeah, on what we're talking about tonight is changing the county regs.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
okay, yes, yeah, okay. All right.
And that's a little confusing at times, but,
Okay, because that's just in general. you know,
Yeah,
the
they-
county regs.
just because EDF is thinking about coming, and it stirred all these people up, and now we got regs by Mr. Wright wanting us to change the county regs, doesn't mean the wind farm is for sure coming. They may not even
Right.
come.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
So we can't be looking at the new regs as it's just EDF. It's anybody.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes.
Anybody else? This is not a public,
I know, there's two companies in the county you want in.
yeah, I know.
Okay.
Sun isn't getting ready to come up, so if you guys are done discussing, I'm gonna move to public input not listed on the agenda. Hearing none, John, do you have anything for us?
I do have a report this month.
Are you giving us 2 minutes to speak?
Pardon?
Are you giving us a chance to speak? Is that what you were saying?
Well, it's public input not on the agenda. I guess, what do you got on your mind?
Oh, heavens.
We're not,
Yeah. Yeah,
it's, if I'm understanding it right, it's not public input on these regs,
okay.
if that's what you're wanting.
Mine are not specifically on these regs, but just something that it will take me 30 seconds to say
Okay.
when considering this. I'm Diane Fraser and I live at 1779 Mohawk Road. And I just wanted to say that if safe setbacks stop a project, then that means our county's too populated, isn't it? And I don't want you to lower safe standards for money. And I hope that you would consider the citizens that you're here to protect over the interests of the big wind farms. As I said in the last meeting, there's probably a place for wind turbines in Kansas, but why set them down in the middle of all these houses? I live on 5 acres, so when our house is 6 feet from our property line. So yes, I'm a 5 acre person who wants a voice, sorry. And one other thing is, once these are built, these are 600-foot towers, like, this is something that will impact generations of people. It's not something that can be re-voted on easily. It's not something that can be taken down. So,
Well, like
You
I
know.
said earlier, the county is going to have them deconstructed when they're done.
well,
It'll be
you know,
written.
these leases get sold time and time again, and when you get down to the six wind farm owning a contract, they're finding out all over Europe and the United States both that these companies say they'll take them down and they don't.
Thank you.
So,
I'm ready for an adjournment motion.
So
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.